Hey guys, welcome back to Total Tactics FPL. It's Fran here and back with my gameweek 38 cheat sheet preview of the season, the final game week of the season. So I hope you guys have had a wonderful year. It's been a fantastic pleasure to have you guys, and it's been a wonderful journey with you guys as well. Let's start with the defenders this week. I would say the debate for the kind of cheap defenders of this week is clearly between Sessegnon and Emerson to round out your sort of third Spurs player. You probably already own someone like Son or Kane, and on top of that, Kulusevski as well. But I think if you're looking for a third Spurs option, Sessegnon and Emerson are probably the better options because they have that sort of ceiling of being able to do well as a fullback in the Antonio Conte structure. I would say between Sessegnon and Emerson, the stats on paper are actually very, very similar. So when you look at Sessegnon's stats here, it's very clear that he does make a lot of key passes and he does get involved within the attacking play. I would say that when it actually comes down to it on paper and just from what I can see on the pitch, that Sessegnon makes a little bit more educated decisions when he's in the box, and I think the assist versus Liverpool and Anfield is a good example of that. Whereas Emerson is someone who, if he's given a multitude of chances, he could take them and he could look for goal scoring opportunities. So perhaps you could argue that he has a higher ceiling there, but I just have a little bit more confidence in Sessegnon and his abilities to deliver within specific games. And Sessegnon for me is the best option between him and Emerson. As far as Chelsea, Liverpool, and City, I think there's an interesting debate to be had here. I would say that just talking about City and the importance of City for the cheat sheet this week, I would say some people have been making mentions of the Jack Grealish clause in the contract in terms of if City were to win the league, Villa getting 15 mil from the clause, and if City were to, let's say, lose the league and Villa were to jump up a few positions in the league table, they would get a roughly 6 million back in revenue. I know that's not how football works, but some people have been thinking about that logic. I just think if you do subscribe to that line of logic whatsoever, then it just makes so much more sense to actually look at City attackers. I just wouldn't really back a City defender in the specific week. We know that City have struggled to kind of keep things super tight at the back, especially with the injuries to key players like Diaz, Stones, and Walker in the last few weeks. And even though Stones and Walker are back in training, and there's a good possibility that City field a fantastic XI at the back, I just think I'd rather back City from an attacking point of view because this Villa team is also very capable of scoring goals. We've seen that time and time again. So what I would say here at City is definitely one I'd avoid. I think Cancelo is good enough coverage of City. As far as Liverpool, I'm not sure if there's an exceptionally high ceiling versus Wolves. Wolves have somehow managed to score quite consistently versus some teams lately, especially versus Chelsea and Liverpool, and City, sorry. But I wouldn't be super confident in saying that Wolves are going to score once again versus Liverpool. This Liverpool team have been extremely formidable at the back, and I think that when it comes down to it, this one important fixture, I would say Liverpool have a great opportunity to keep a clean sheet. I just wouldn't say that the potential is as good as Chelsea. I think Chelsea are the most exciting options from the defenders, just because the defenders provide so much from the attacking point of view. And you have the importance of a home game here where Antonio Rudiger and even Marcos Alonso are on their way out of the club, even Azpilicueta potentially. And they will probably all put in, hopefully, what is a great kind of send-off performance to the home fans. So I think this is a good opportunity here, especially looking at from the lens of recency bias, Alonso and James being involved in that previous Leicester goal, that they could do it again versus this Watford team who pretty much rolled over versus Leicester in the previous week. I would say Rudiger is a rise, but I would still say the priority is to go for Alonso and James as a partnership if you could. Rudiger is definitely a keeper this week, so I think that's sort of the point to mention here. Van Dijk is someone who you could move out of just because you don't know whether he'd start. For me, I would say when you're looking at keepers as well, my logic is the same. I think Spurs, Chelsea, and Liverpool have the best odds of keeping a clean sheet, and that's what you're looking for a final transfer in the season if you really want to get out of a keeper. So that's pretty much what I would say for the defenders. For the midfielders, I would say Eriksen's a very interesting differential gambit. The reason why I say that is because of the context of the Brentford fixture versus Leeds. We know that Leeds are down on goal deficit, and when it comes down to it, if they were to end the season on the same amount of points as Burnley, which is possible, Leeds would actually be the team that gets relegated because of the goal deficit. However, this does mean that Leeds will probably look instead to actually get the full 3 points versus Brentford and actually score against this Brentford team. This does give great opportunities for Eriksen, for example, on the other hand, and on the other side of the pitch to actually find great opportunities to assist and create plays. I would say Eriksen's not exactly sort of a player like Madison, for example, where he's constantly looking for shots on target. He's kind of someone who's much more creative and trying to illustrate things from his sort of left-hand flank right now, which is where he operates from. And he has great opportunities of doing that because of Brentford's style of play and how he is able to kind of look for these key crosses to players like Tony and even some of the defenders in set piece scenarios. So I do really like Eriksen as a punt this week. Between Saka, Kulusevski, and Maddison, I would say Maddison's clearly the best transfer in this week. I think Maddison is the most informed player out of the three of them. Kulusevski is dealing with rotation issues with Lucas Moura, even though the fixture is so good on paper versus Norwich. And I will remind you that even if Kulusevski might come off the bench, he has found great opportunities to actually provide off the bench. And we saw that as an example when he provided 2 assists versus Son versus Leicester. As far as Saka, I think he's been a fantastic player all season long. But clearly this Arsenal team have hit a bit of a kind of mental block towards securing top 4 at the end of the season. And I think Saka's not really been a problem necessarily. He's been someone who's on penalties, so I think he's a great option to keep this week, but not necessarily a transfer I'd be looking at as a priority. Barnes and Rafinha are going to be good options this week. Barnes is someone who, as I mentioned in previous kind of episodes, that he has a great partnership with Vardy, and for some reason Barnes does come alive as a player when Vardy seems to play, and this will be the case if he gets to start for Southampton. So I think Barnes got the rest in the previous week, so that will be interesting, and a great opportunity for him to actually hopefully do well. I wouldn't consider him a kind of key transfer this week. I think the biggest differential transfer coming in this week would be Jarrod Bowen, because he's the most informed player and someone I have a little bit more confidence in. But when it comes down to the fixture, clearly Barnes is a good option. Rafinha too is a good option. He's on the other edge of that coin with Eriksen, right? On the other side of the coin, sorry. And he will be that talisman for Leeds, where if they were to secure safety from relegation, he would be that player who needs to step up and actually find chances to create and even maybe find an opportunity to score. I think there is a possibility that we've seen Brentford being involved in a lot of high-scoring games this season. I think Rafinha could be a player who could take control in that game and be a great punt. Mount and Bowen for me are the best options in the kind of mid-tier prices. I would say Mount has a fantastic fixture versus Watford. He got that rest crucially last week, which is going to be once again a very interesting option, and the same reason why I've risen Havertz, right? He is someone who's coming back from injury and could be a great option next week, and I think Mount and Havertz versus a very, very weak Watford team could find a lot of opportunities to score as well. Bowen is simply someone who's been in fantastic form all season. He's been West Ham's talisman pretty much from game week 6. And there's nothing else to say other than he's been exceptionally hot in form. I think a brace for City will tell you all of that. And Zaha is always that kind of bogey character versus Man United, where ever since those terrible rumors of him started previously back in the day with him and David Moyes, he's somehow always done extremely well versus United. And I think he always steps up for that game. So he's a little bit of a cult pick this week as a good option. Son and Diaz are going to be my still most lethal options. Diaz got the rest after the FA Cup game, and he didn't play in the previous match whatsoever. So I really think that he could start the next game here and find a great opportunity to score if he is needed versus this Wolves team. And I think Liverpool will absolutely be pushing for it. As far as Son, for me, he is pretty much the best captain option when it comes to all the midfielders this week. And I would say potentially even the best captaincy option within the game. Son is someone who we've seen is competing for the Golden Boot. And even though Kane is also there competing for penalties as well, I think there could be even a scope for, let's say, Kane to maybe give a penalty to Son if the situation or scenario arose where Son could get the Golden Boot. I know people don't believe that would happen, but I think it could happen on the final game of the season. We'll see what happens. But Son, without the penalties, is going to be a fantastic option. Sterling, for me, it could be a very interesting punt. I just don't really like ever kind of going for the Man City midfielder as a punt. I think KDB makes a lot of sense always because he's almost nailed to play, because he doesn't have to be resting between games and playing within European games. I just think with Sterling, the highs and lows are so hard to call, and I don't really think there's an easy way to really decide on when Sterling's going to have a great game where he scores a brace. Foden has been always consistent, I would say, unlike Sterling, and therefore for me I would only be interested in KDB as a punt, as a move away from Salah if you had the opportunity and luxury to do so. Salah is actually back in training, so I would say the rise to Mane is mostly just because I think he'll be nailed, and Salah could come off the bench. There's a possibility of that, but I would say if you have more problems in your team, don't look towards a Salah transfer. I would say look for other transfers such as defenders this week, or even midfielders who are within cheaper price ranges, right? Players like Maddison or Bowen are super interesting. But if you really have no problems in your team, you have a deep bench this week, maybe going out of Salah could be interesting if you'd like to do that. If we head towards the forwards now to round things off, you have players within pretty much every price category, one for each. Nketiah is the best option, I would say, since this Everton team will probably be coming back from a little bit of a kind of euphoria from safety from relegation. at home. That they will now be playing at the Emirates, and that's going to be a big fixture for Arsenal and also Nketiah to hopefully make things right, given the loss versus Newcastle in the previous week. And Nketiah, for me, I can see him starting. Tony is going to be, for me, the best option out of all the forwards who are priced below the kind of premium tier this week. And that's simply because of, as I said, the state of play with the Leeds fixture. For the same reason that I kind of gave the logic of why Eriksen's an interesting differential punt, I think Tony is a massive. We also know that Leeds have suffered a lot from suspensions as well. Stuart Dallas injury. It's a great game for Tony on paper, and I really think that he's going to be a good option. Richarlison is someone who's been exceptionally in form. He might have deserved a fall really for this week. I don't think the ceiling is going to be really high versus Arsenal, but I know this Arsenal team is going to be pushing for 3 points, and they haven't been able to keep a clean sheet ever since the injury of Tierney and Partey. So I really think there's good scope here for Richarlison to continue with his goal scoring form. He's done extremely well in open play. He's also still taking penalties as far as I'm aware. He'll be a great option for this week. Jesus, for the same reason why I still think Sterling's a differential, is going to be a differential for the same reason. It's very hard to kind of call it with the Man City players this week. You're not going to be fully aware of what the XI is. There's a lot of rotation that's going to be possible, and I just don't really like the punt there. I think Vardy and Kane are your best options this week, but Lukaku versus Watford is a very interesting differential too. I think Vardy versus Southampton is going to be a good one because the Southampton team don't necessarily have anything to play for. They're playing at home, and I think Vardy is interested in kind of ending his season on a good spot. I also think that Vardy is someone who's very consistent game on game. He's a big game player too, but it also shows that he's been very consistent versus weaker teams. Lukaku, however, for me, as I said, is the most interesting differential of this week because he does have an opportunity to start versus Watford. I'm not exactly sure what his position is long term with Chelsea, but I think this is a great fixture for him because this Watford team have one of the worst defenses in the league. And if there's ever going to be a game where Lukaku can kind of bully and boss defenders, it would probably be this one. And that's going to be it for this Gameweek 38 cheat sheet preview. It's been a fantastic pleasure, as I said, having you guys this season. I hope you guys round out the season the best way possible with the green arrow, and I'll see you guys next season.